Yeah, that's the good stuff right here. Hard, soft literature. Yeah. I mean, sort of, kind of. I tell you what, I think I'll check it out. I'm not normally one to destroy books, but I'm just kind of baked for it. Hiya, folks. Fruit and Doggy here, doing somewhat of an unusual recording because instead of a typical book, I'm recording Shonen Jump. And when I say Shonen Jump, actually, this would be the front cover to be technical. I only mean the very first volume. I can't even believe how old this was. Back from January 2003, and this is the very first one, Volume 1, Number 1. $5 even. I believe I was just in a random local store. Actually, I remember what store it was now. It was the grocery store, supermarket, still there. It's changed its design quite a bit now, but at one point it had a pretty substantial area just for magazines. And that's where I found this. And I can't really say I'm too terribly surprised anymore that they completely removed that section because magazines just overall have greatly diminished. Not surprisingly, with the increase of the internet. Who wants to take up all of the space of having several volumes of magazines when, depending on what it is, you only have interest in a portion of it and have to pay for the content and the space of everything else. But back in 2003, the early 2000s, this was one of the few areas where we got an influx of Eastern culture. Excuse me. There was some anime on TV. I think at that time it would have been basically just like your Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, and I'm sure there's a couple of other, maybe a Gundam. But that was about it. And this is the only manga I've ever actually purchased at any point. For one thing, I don't think I ever saw the second volume of this come out. I don't remember ever seeing follow-up series. So, at that point, if I had found more, I might have actually bought a few more. But looking back, I'm glad I never actually spent the money to do so. There's a few simple reasons why. I don't find it hard to read right to left. It's not like that wildly changes anything. It's just a slight difference. I do admit, as I was kind of thumbing through it, I found it somewhat annoying because as a person who's dominant right hand, and I've read books so much otherwise, having the weight of the book in the left hand, because it just makes more sense to hold it that way, I don't know, it sort of annoys me. Because, I don't know, it's just something that comes instinctive, that because I'm reading it right to left, I hold it in the left hand. But if I were reading it the other way around, I would do it completely backwards. But, I mean, especially in this case with Shonen Jump, because it has 5 different series smashed into one, Yu-Gi-Oh!, One Piece, Dragon Ball Z, Yu Yu Hakusho, and Sandland, it is quite thick. So if I had one, especially considering the length of these series nowadays, Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, Yu Yu Hakusho got pretty long. I don't know how long the actual manga series of Yu-Gi-Oh! Got. It's so wildly different from the anime that I don't even know how they made that transition. It's so weird. The original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga was really pretty dark, kind of sinister. And it wasn't just a card game. When he is proclaimed to be the master of games, it's a little bit more literal. He played and competed in several different contests and games, some of which were very untraditional, not a normal game, more like a let me make up a contest based on the general environment around me. These little I guess I'll just call them contests. That's what they really were. A lot of them were quite cerebral. He had to really be strategic and tactical. So I would say a lot more interesting than just a card game. But again, even I would say ignoring the tonal differences, I just find it fascinating and so strange how drastically it changed, where it's like, no, shelve all that other crap. Phone call. I'll just have to pause and fix the recording. It's not even, it's just telemarketer bullcrap. So I'll wait for the phone call to stop ringing. So I can't stand phone calls. I don't mind them. A little dramatic. Here's worse. There we go. That's back to what I was just saying. I find it interesting how with Yu-Gi-Oh! It's like, okay, shelve all those other games, all these creative ideas, these different contests and tactical things that come up. Put all of that aside, just a card game. Just a card game. It's like, I really have to imagine that that was all just pure marketing. Where it's like, I mean, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card games, definitely not as massive as Magic the Gathering or the Pokemon game card games, but they were still a pretty popular series for a while. I think they've died off. I guess there might still be new like Yu-Gi-Oh! Style series that are coming out. I don't know if they've got like another spin-off. I don't even know. I have no idea. Lost so much track of what's going on with Yu-Gi-Oh! But either way, it's just kind of a trip to see the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga and see how different it is. But I have no idea how long it actually went, especially through Shonen Jump. Saneland, actually produced by Akira Toriyama, the same person who does the Dragon Ball series. I've heard nothing of that ever, so I'm guessing it was just a canceled series that never went anywhere. Which, like, looking back at it now, seems like a real shame, because after he did Dragon Ball Z, I know there was Dragon Ball GT. I don't think he pinned any of it or penciled any of it, but he signed off on it. He gave us permission for it. But there was a pretty big gap between Dragon Ball and then Dragon Ball Z / GT and now Dragon Ball Super. So it's like, man, it seems a shame that Sandland was never finished. It seemed kind of interesting. But yeah, I'm glad in retrospect I never did get into manga, because there's, I think, quite a few different problems or issues I have with it. One, I mentioned briefly earlier, the way I hold into my hands, what feels comfortable, what comes naturally. I know this is a very personal or very specific issue. I think it's just completely me, to be honest. I'm picky about small stuff. So I would not consider that to be a valid criticism, just me being strange. But one thing that I do consider to be completely valid is, compared to comic books, the manga is completely black and white. You look at it, these are just main pages, no color whatsoever. It's all just black and white shading. Which, I guess I will retract that very briefly, because there are some color pages. But I believe it's pretty standard with manga that they won't be colored. It's not it's pretty common for them to be just black and white. And when you compare that to the way comic books are, that seems like a real that's a significant loss, I would argue. The other thing is, I know it's going to vary considerably between which series you would look at and compare, but in order to get any amount of story, you have to buy several manga to get anywhere. And some of these go on for, I imagine a more common one would be more maybe in the dozens range. Which, again, even if it's only $5, that's $60 just to get 12 books, 12 manga. Which, compared to, again, kind of a nerdy, geeky person, what I could use that money for instead, traditional books, which I could get several more stories. Sure, there's no pictures, but for somebody who reads, I don't need pictures. I haven't done comic books either, so that wouldn't be one, but movies or video games. I could buy a couple of really good video games used for the price of just one manga series. And of course, like I said, this one in particular, Shonen Jump, is unusually large, but if, again, it's bad enough trying to keep track of a book series and losing your place because you need all of them in order to follow along the storyline. But with a manga, that's even more of greater necessity. And this would have been a pretty big problem back then in those days, even in the preceding years, just through the early 2000s. Getting a consistent series all the way through would have been a bit of a pain. Now with online shopping, with all the different options there, not really a big deal other than, again, the cost. Excuse me. And of course, we're much more accustomed to having content from around the world coming in the United States. We import so many different things. Manga, anime, JRPGs, and different games from the Orient. Yeah, that's just completely normal now. Not so novel or unusual as it used to be. But yeah, trying to get an entire series, making sure you have all the books you need so that you can actually I can follow the story, I can see what's going on. That would be a hardship or a difficulty. And again, this would depend on the series, but there's quite a lot of downtime to these. For instance, in the Dragon Ball Z one, it's when Frieza and his father arrive on Earth. So there is some action, but there's quite a bit of it that's just them talking, them engaging in random chit chat. So it's it's not something that's not really. You need those aspects in order to tell a story. It can't just be constant action, just fight after fight after fight. But when I think about if I were to actually have the Dragon Ball manga, it's man, how many of those books would just be filled with dialogue and wouldn't have very much action? And it's man, is it really worth having this volume? I could kind of just skip it, couldn't I? And then this is something I've noticed with some manga as well. Not just a particular manga, it's more specific usually, but sometimes when I look at the panels for a fight scene, even when I look at the entire fight and I can see the aftermath, sometimes I just can't quite deduce what they're really trying to express in that panel and that clash or that interaction. It's what is this attack doing? What is the effect of this move? when I just look at a single panel, no movement, I mean, sure, they have these different artistic cues and different ways to express things, but that can only go so far sometimes, where it's like, I just don't know what they're really trying to show me. And so I find that that is kind of a limitation of the manga or of the medium. And I have to be completely honest, when I think about my time in the investment, my time, my physical space, my money, a good anime, when compared to its manga origin, it basically is a faithful translation. It just takes what is in the manga, sometimes like really panel for panel, and just animates it. Of course, there's going to be some transition effects. There might be a little bit of some filler. And I don't mean like entire episodes, just a little bit of extra space in between that's not shown in the manga. But really, it's just a faithful recreation. And so it's like, well, wait a second. If I could choose between reading the manga or just watching the anime, I'm just going to pick to watch the anime. That's so much quicker, and especially in the fights, it's like it's just so easy to see what's going on. It's like, oh, okay, I saw that in the manga, didn't really get what was going on, and it's like, yeah, thank you, animators. And I'm sure when they create those scenes in particular, they probably are communicating with the creator and, storyboarding it. It's like, okay, we saw this panel, what was going on here? Let's go through the moment to moment. Let's actually work this all the way through. Plus, I think in anime, when they create the fights, I think they do spruce it up. They zhuzh it up a little bit. They add a little bit more. Because I can kind of understand that. When you're creating a manga, you can only draw so many panels of back and forth fighting before it starts to, like, okay, I kind of get it, let's move on. Like, let's see what happens. For it to really work in a manga, you have to, like, do these bold actions, like a special move. You have to do something to make it more dynamic, because you only have still pictures. So if you just show a normal fight that's just going on, a grudge match, and it just keeps going on, and they're trading blows, that doesn't really work. Whereas you can make that work a little bit more through an anime when it's animated, because it's like you can watch it, you can see the back and forth, the energy there. So I think that when they animate it, I think they do add more dynamics. It's more engaging, it's more interesting. I don't know, because I'm not a manga fan, I'm not a comic book fan. That's been my interpretation. I mean, at one point, comic books were a massive industry. So when people read comic books and see those fights and those spectacles, they must get something out of it. They must enjoy that. And they must do the same thing I do when I read a book. I visualize it and have it in my imagination. They must do the same thing. And I think for me, I almost do the exact opposite, because, like, I can see everything that the artist has decided to show me, so I don't tend to fill in those gaps as much. It's like, it's kind of like looking at snapshots. So it's like, this is what they've shown me. I don't tend to expand upon it too much. Maybe that's ironic. Maybe that's part of the reason why I don't find myself so compelled and interested and invested in manga and comic book. Excuse me. If you are a fan of those mediums, if you've I've spent hundreds of dollars, you should see my collection. You're not wrong when you say it takes up a lot of space. I know that, but I am very happy with it. That's cool, I can appreciate that. Because frankly, manga has transitioned or translates into anime, which I do enjoy. And if it weren't for people who bought manga, then we wouldn't have the anime. So, awesome. Thank you. And then comic books have generated the massive influx of superhero movies we see. I actually am not that invested in those. They get a little bit boring to me. Not so much when they were a little bit more on the cutting edge, but it's been 15 plus years probably that we've been going through nothing but superhero movies. I'm kind of happy to table that for a while. But again, I'm not gonna complain or crap all over somebody's hobby. I'm just explaining why it's not for me. Completely a personal preference thing. And I think probably for those who are the most dedicated or invested or interested fans, probably in the same way that I would look and appraise a video game, just looking at the cover, looking at, it's like, yeah, that's going to be a good game, where it's like, oh, garbage. I'm sure the same thing is fairly true for comic book fans, where just looking at it, flipping, just a casual flip through, a general sense of the cover, the series, where it's like, this is a book worth getting. This is a comic I will invest in, and this is a series I'm willing to take a chance on. And then there are ones where it's like, no, I can tell that the art isn't going to be that great. The panel design, more kind of the way that they display action. I think that would be tremendously important for somebody who's going to be a fan. But anyways, I can't say this explicitly because I only bought the first Shonen Jump, but I do believe that probably early 2003 would have been around the time where manga was really first being introduced to the West, to the United States. I think that's probably true. I think Shonen Jump was pretty revolutionary. That's why it's so popular. That's why you hear the phrase Shonen series. It's just interesting to think about how much things have changed in those 17 years, where manga is, I wouldn't say it's mainstream, it's still kind of a geek culture thing, but pretty popular, pretty common. Definitely so with anime. I think there's a lot of people who do watch anime that you may not necessarily think it's like, oh, you watch anime? But yeah. Anyways, I'm rambling at this point. I can't even really speak to what Shonen Jump has done through the years. I was just gonna say, One Piece. That's still going on. I cannot believe that. And in many ways, I can't believe that Dragon Ball has been revived. Yu Yu Hakusho, that actually did just have a plain, clean ending. So I'm kind of thankful for that. Yu-Gi-Oh, I think sadly is just still spawning off new ones. It's like, just let it go. It's just a card game. It's kind of a silly premise to begin with, when actually its origin and original concept was much more interesting. We kind of got shafted, I think. But I don't know. I do encourage anybody who is interested, check it out, look online. I think it's potentially worth your time, but I would really lean towards just going with the anime. I know there's going to be purists and like, you are leading people astray, sacrilegious. I can't believe you're saying that. How dare you? It's like, that's just my opinion, bro. But anyways, since this was kind of a unconventional thing to talk about in a book discussion, I would say my overall conclusion would be burn it. I'm planning to get rid of this. I don't have any use for it. I don't want it. So it's like, I thought I'd do recording before I gave it away, or I'm not going to recycle it. I'm going to try to find somebody who wants it, but I don't have any use for it. I've held on to it for way too long. But anyways, I'll see you around later, folks. And as always, fruit and doggy. No, wait. Fruit and doggy. Gotta do the hand throw. Yes, there really is nothing quite like curling up with a fine piece of literature, if you know what I mean.